Welcome, cryptocurrency investing community. My name is Mark Anstead, and I am here with the CEO of LTO Network, Rick Schmitz. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, what your involvement is in the project, what you're doing specifically, and how LTO Network came around, because you guys have been in business for about 4 years now. So tell us a little bit about the history of the project and the organization.
Yeah, sure. So I started as a tax lawyer back in 2008 at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte. From there, I started my own company just during my business, during the regular days at work. I started firm24.com. It is a place where you can incorporate entities, and it's like, call it the Uber for notary and for legal services in the Netherlands. And basically, it involves a workflow where parties try to set up a company, they fill in a form, it generates a deed of incorporation that needs to get stamped by certain people like the notary, and needs to go to the Chamber of Commerce. And from there, we thought, okay, the thing we're doing here is actually pretty good. Well, you can use that in a lot of industries. It's basically a document lifecycle where you start with data on one end and an end product at the other end. So we started to build this centralized solution around this as a software as a service, and we call it Legal Things. And it was the centralized solution which we were bringing to corporates, and those corporates were buying the solution in order to streamline their business and making sure they were gaining the efficiencies of their data collection, transposing that into workflows, and then managing their document life cycles. And then a client came to us and said, okay, we're doing this process with another company, but they want to use their own software systems. Can we make it like, can they communicate to each other so that they can have their own systems in place, and we can have your system in place, but they communicate on the same process? And we said, all right, yeah, but we need blockchain. That's pretty new. And we were looking into Ethereum back then, and we said, okay, we might be able to do this via a smart contract. So I asked my lead developer, Arnold Daniels. I said, okay, can we make this into something called a smart contract? Or like, can we do this decentralized? We started to play around with it and came to the conclusion that it was not possible on Ethereum. And that the thing we were trying to do, like having systems communicating in a decentralized way in a process, needs to have something else. Because we need to have people and machines being instructed on a process. And, well, a smart contract is a little different. So he said, okay, let's try to make our own solution then. So we started building our own solution to make it possible to run a decentralized workflow for organizations that needed it. So you can start with a centralized solution, but when you need a decentralized solution, you're ready to go. We released testnet back in 2018 for this particular client, and that basically kicked off everything. Like, all right, people were like, the companies we're working with say, all right, hey, this solution is actually really useful. This is the first blockchain project which you can implement without replacing our infrastructure and our legacy system. So all the parties that were looking into blockchain, like the big governments, like the big multinationals, because it was basically big hype end of 2017, beginning of 2018, saying, okay, guys, we need you guys to implement your solution in our infrastructures. So we started doing that. And yeah, that was like the birth of LTO Network. And it basically, it turned around. Like we started with this centralized company, um, became making a decentralized solution, and people were starting to love our decentralized solution more than our centralized solution. So we became our own integrators of our blockchain solution. That was quite fun. Yeah, and well, we got some big projects, but we're probably going to speak about that later.
Awesome. So one of the big terms that everyone's bringing up, obviously blockchain, is being integrated in all these platforms and all of these systems. And you keep mentioning decentralized. And you have a decentralized workflow automation built into your platform. What really makes it decentralized? Can you go into detail about that? Because in my opinion, one of the big things that will probably happen in 2019 is a lot of regulation will probably be put into place, especially with like GDPR starting to ramp up in 2018. How is LTO Network decentralized, and what does that mean for other businesses using your platform?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. Like, okay, GDPR was in top of my mind for a long time. Being a tax lawyer for that long, I knew that this was coming and this would have a big impact. So I said to my architect, I said, Arnold, we need privacy in our solution by design. We don't need to have a workaround. We need it in there from day one. We're not going to deliver any nodes to anybody or any solution which doesn't comply with the GDPR regulation coming up. Because today it's in Europe, tomorrow it'll be in the United States, and the day after in China, right? So he said, okay, so how can we benefit from a private network but having the security of a big network and a decentralized solution at the same time? So we began with we built a hybrid solution around that. So what we did is we came up with this miniature private chains where every party that starts a workflow where it's involved in shares the data. And the data itself is only shared between those parties, nobody else. But every submission of data and every step being taken in that process is anchored onto the global chain. Only that. So a random hash being created of that data being submitted on the global public chain. That public chain is much bigger. Everybody who runs a private chain also has a connection to our public network. So our node consists of a private layer and a public layer. So because there are only a couple of parties involved and we don't rely on the consensus mechanism of the public network in order to add a piece of data, parties are able to delete parts or entire chains if they're obligated by GDPR. So if, let's say, 3 or 4 parties, which happens like all the time in these private chains, if one of the parties needs to delete his chain from his node, he's able to do so. The only thing he will contain are the steps that are being taken into that workflow and the anchors that he stores into his node. Like he can have a perfectly fine audit trail that he can prove, hey, this is the data that was submitted, and these are the hashes that belong to those data submissions. He can prove the audit trail, but he can delete the data which was into those submissions. Right. So that's a really important part of LTO Network being GDPR compliant by design.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the other, I guess, parts about your platform is what's called a live contract. And I don't want people to confuse that with a smart contract. Can you give a little bit of an explanation between what a live contract is on your platform?
Yeah, definitely. So a live contract is basically the same as a smart contract, but a smart contract is Ethereum, and a live contract is the way how we structure a workflow. So a live contract structures the way a process should look like. We look at a JSON schema, which is dictated by the JSON schema we came up with, and parties look at those JSON schemas and say, okay, this is the process we want. We are modeling this process according to the JSON schema and submitting data according to that same JSON schema as we said how it should look. And parties can communicate in that way, and every time data is being submitted, the data is being transposed to the other nodes according to the JSON schema. People have it back on their nodes, and if they have it on their nodes, they can transform it into any data format they needed into their own systems. Right? They can put a simple JSON or James path on it and pull it back into their own systems so that they have it in SOAP or XML or whatever data structure they're using. So basically, it's the way how you model a process. That's basically it. So live contracts, it's pretty similar to smart contracts, because a smart contract is the way how you model a process contract into Ethereum, but we call it live contract because we have you need to have your own name, right?
Makes it a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I would say so.
So in terms of becoming a node on your chain, what's the process like to become a node? Can anybody become a node, or how does that look?
Yeah. Okay, so we are, like, I think the only permissionless private blockchain. And that sounds like a little bit weird to most people, because like, how can you be a permissionless private chain, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how that works is as follows. Like, the permissions itself are orchestrated within the live contract. So the guy or the organization that sets up his node and builds a workflow that is inside that node can invite anybody who wants. So okay, let's say I invite you on a process. You're able to participate on that process via my node, or make your own decision of setting up your own node, communicating on that same process. You don't need permission from me or anybody else in the network to set up your node and communicate on that process, because you're invited to that process. And if you're invited, you're able to spin up a node and collect the data on a decentralized way. And everybody can do that according to that way. So we are having a process, and let's say somebody else also has a process with me. You would have no knowledge that another party has running a node between me and someone else, and what the data is being transferred between those. That will be kept private at all times. It is always on a single process level that the data is being shared, and every process allows you to set up your own node to participate.
Very cool. And I think that's one of the key differences, because whenever people think about private blockchains, they think either R3 or Hyperledger.
Hyperledger, yeah.
Yeah, those are some of the main permissioned private blockchains out there right now that people know about. So I think this is one of those key differences to, I guess, help explain how LTO Network is bringing in a permissionless version of a private chain. Because, frankly, I personally hadn't heard of any permissionless private chains before this. It's a very difficult thing to understand for many people. And that kind of goes into my next question. What's it going to look like for you guys to help these businesses, or just your average Joe, maybe not your average Joe, because I doubt they'll understand blockchain, but just businesses in general, to understand these workflows and how the blockchain is going to work as, I guess, the underlying layer for data?
Yeah.
Or is the platform going to, in the future, function where you don't really even know that blockchain is even being used?
Yeah, I think you just hit the spot word there. People don't need to see that blockchain is being used because everybody just wants to keep on using their own system and keeps on the way of working like they are supposed to do for the last 10, 15 years, right? So especially when you're dealing with big corporations and governments, they want to keep things like they are, but want to gain efficiency from using blockchain. I think the best case we recently did was the transfer of waste between the Netherlands and Belgium. So we are a big waste country. We earn a great deal of money by recycling waste in the Netherlands. So what we do is we get out the good stuff from waste we produce. We actually buy waste from England, we buy waste from Germany, then we recycle it here, get out the good materials, and then we ship it to the rest of Europe. So what basically happens is that you need to have a permit here in the Netherlands in order to transfer waste to another country. That is all codified how that should look in Europe. So you need a couple of things there. You need a bill of load, which you probably also have in the rest of the world. Like, okay, what are you transporting? How many kilograms is it? What type of waste are we talking about? How many shipments do you think you're going to do in this period? And all those things are now being communicated through fax machines. Like, wait, like we were doing this for the last 30, 40 years in the Netherlands. So they came to us and said, okay, can we do this on your solution on LTO Network? Is this useful for that? And we said, well, an integrator asked us, and the integrator said, okay, because we built this solution for the government, they want to have apps being used instead of fax machines, and we want to have those different actors on the process to communicate on this process and orchestrating what tasks is next, and the data being being shared across the stakeholders into a single process. We want to do that on your network. Can we use it? We said, yeah, definitely. This is exactly one of the big cases. What we thought, yeah, this is the exact thing we're good at. So we set up this workflow for the transfer of waste. We did 1,000 processes, and what happened is that instead of having 150 euros per process being spent, they were getting that down to 68 euros because of the efficiency. Like, they don't need to wait for fax machines anymore. They don't need to wait whether it was okay to transfer the permit itself. Could correspond with the workflow of the transportation itself. Like, you don't need to wait on an okay anymore from the government. If you have sufficient rides within the period and sufficient kilograms, the transportation just can start. And if that transportation goes to Belgium, the data is being shared with the Belgian government. You don't need to wait on a okay from them. So having all those data being shared across the stakeholders gained so much efficiency that they said, okay, we need to do this across Europe. So that's where we stand right now, waiting for the fiat to do this for the rest of Europe. But they saved from 150 to 68 euros. And if you're talking about 600 transportations in the Netherlands alone, we're talking about 40, $50 million being saved every year on a single decentralized workflow, right? So the impact is enormous, and parties are getting more familiar with it every day. But yeah, you don't see anything that blockchain is being used. It is just an infrastructure layer which is connecting systems together, and well, where parties don't have and don't want to rely on a centralized solution, especially when big corporations and governments are involved. This is exactly the case.
Definitely. I think one of the big things that you're bringing up, that a lot of large enterprises are they're a little weary of blockchain, mostly because of the cost to build the infrastructure. And so different solutions like this, where you don't have to basically build everything from the ground up, you can just do an integration and get the benefit from that right away. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions that a lot of people are having about some of this technology in basically almost every type of industry. There's a lot of different people trying to tackle different problems that people are facing, whether there's a lot of different industries. I don't need to go into all of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the big key factors that you guys are doing is you don't have to have these companies completely change everything that they're doing. They're just making it more simplified and easier.
Making
money.
life a little bit more efficient, right? So where can we gain efficiencies? If you're collecting data in one silo, why not share it with the other silos that are involved in the process, right? So that we can use that same data and reuse that time and time again. And so that we can have systems where we are optimizing. Like what I always say to my clients, I say, okay, what do you do to optimize your business? Well, we spend a lot of money on business process optimization. We have CRM, we have ERP. I said, okay, but you're all doing that into your own silo, right? Into your own organization. What if you start communicating outside of that silo? Okay, yeah, we use PDF. We send contracts. We use emails, and we communicate over the phone on processes. I said, exactly. But you're running like 400,000-500,000 of these same processes, and you communicate via email and sending PDFs and letters and communicate over the phone. I said, you're producing structured data into unstructured data, sending that to the guys you want to collaborate with. They receive that unstructured data, making it structured again by putting it into their own systems. What if we can have those two systems, or three systems if you have three parties, communicate via a decentralized workflow where structured data is being sent across? Wouldn't that be much more efficient? We would unlock a new level of efficiency, right? And parties like, yeah, I never kind of thought of it like that. So that's where
the little bell rings, and
that's where the bell rings. Like, oh, and I don't need to change anything into my current infrastructure. No, it's just one process where you work on together. You only share the data that you want to share from the system that you want to use. So simple. So yeah, people like the simplicity of the solution, and that's pretty simple to communicate and set it up and to work together on this process.
That's awesome. And I think really the big key for a lot of these organizations is two things. One, saving money. Two, their life's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I don't know who wouldn't complain with that.
I would say so too.
So moving on, you have this coin or token on your platform, and it's the LTO token. How is it used on the platform or within your guys' ecosystem?
Yep.
How is it being utilized?
Yeah, so we have a pure utility token. It's based on least proof of importance. That's our algorithm which we use. So every time you do a transaction, like you're doing a step in a workflow, you submit data or you invite somebody on a workflow, that counts as a transaction. And a transaction is one LTO. And that's basically the payment for using the network. And the more you have the network, first ownership of the network. So we compare usage to the stake you hold of the network. The more likely it is to be selected as a validator of that transaction to receive those fees. And if you receive the fees, obviously you make money. You receive the tokens which you can use. So that's basically it. If you want to run a node for a process and you want to do private stuff, you also need those tokens, because every time you do that transaction within that private layer, it anchors onto our public chain, and every time that anchor, you pay 1 LTO every transaction. And we from all processes we made a rough calculation. It is about 30 to 35 transactions per workflow. That is like so you would pay around today 30 cents for each workflow to run from A to Z.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So does this mean that all of the clients, you already have a bunch of clients, if you guys who are watching didn't already know that,
Yeah.
are all of your clients going to be using this token? And does that mean that they're specifically going to be like a legal things client, or are they just going to be an integration partner for LTO Network going forward? Is there going to be like sort of a fork type of deal between legal things and LTO Network?
Yeah, so basically we have two types of clients. So we have clients of legal things, being the integrator of LTO Network. Legal things would solve everything for that particular client. So if we would serve the end client as legal things, we would provide the workflow, provide the connections to the system, making sure that they have their legacy systems connected to LTO Network. And we would, because no big organizations buy tokens, we would lease the tokens to that organization, making sure that they can do sufficient transactions for their needs, right? So LTO would be the buyer of those tokens, leasing them to the organization, which legal things would serve. Then we have another type of client, and that is where we are putting our focus in, and that is the integrators. The integrators are doing exactly the same as legal things. They're using LTO Network to implement at their clients. So they would buy tokens. They exactly know how that works, and they would lease that to their clients as well, right? Exactly the same way as legal things does currently. And that's the way it should go, because we've been talking to a lot of governments, a lot of big organizations, and they all say the same thing. There's no way we can buy tokens. Just bring me a solution, and we are paying fiat for it, right? And how you solve that with your token ecosystem,
They don't care.
do so. We don't care.
Awesome. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read a question that actually one of your community members wanted me to ask you. So he said, with the project matured at an estimated timeline of 4 to 5 years, it is expected most of the tokens have moved to the mainnet and are in use by LTO Network clients. How will, at this time, will it be possible for additional clients to join the network if all tokens are in use? Can transaction fees be adjusted so that clients can use the same amount of tokens for all network transactions? And if so, what are the plans to adjust transaction fees in comparison to exchange pricing? So you got a few questions there. I can go back through if you want.
No, I can, and I think I totally understand where he's going to. Like, okay, I can go into exact the layers of questions, but I know what he means. It always comes to this, right? Okay, so you're having a successful product. Let's say it's same as with Ethereum, right? So that was a successful fabric in the beginning, and then it became really expensive to run a smart contract. So expensive that people would say, well, not for my solution, because I need to have something else, like I just cannot use it because the gas ain't worth it, right? In our network, it's a little different. So what we do, we say, okay, we let's say you reach the state where all tokens are circulated within the network, and all nodes that are within the network, they make a great deal of money out of it. But for another party to join, it's becoming really expensive if you keep the price in fiat for putting a transaction on it, the same amount as it currently is. Let's say it's €1 to put a transaction on it. If that is, well, let's say that the party that wants to join thinks that's too much, and they won't join. But what if the people who are validating the transactions, the nodes that are validating the transactions, would say, okay, but we think that 10 cents is also fine for receiving, for the validation of that transaction, right? Then you could accept a lower amount as a node, so less tokens being spent on a single transaction. We currently ask one LTO to do a transaction, but the nodes, if they want, they could also accept a tenth of an LTO to accept the transaction. Nodes can decide on their own, and obviously the nodes who are asking the least amount of money, or the least amount of LTO for validating a transaction, will be chosen to validate the transaction, and the other nodes will probably follow if they don't receive any transaction fees anymore. It is all about market making, right? So
Exactly.
if the benefits are higher than the costs, the nodes will accept a lower amount of tokens being circulated around, as long as if you transpose it to fiat, you're gaining money out of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was like a really good explanation. I actually didn't know that personally. It's kind of cool how you can bring a real marketplace essentially into the network. Now, how are those nodes going to be able to communicate with one another about the price of the LTO, or how many LTO that they're trying to receive? Is that going to be like on like an interface where you can sort of see like, all right, how much are you paying for like gas fees on like your browser, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, so we have a wallet like everybody else, where you can see how much a transaction would cost you, where you could see what your balance is of the tokens you hold, what the total circulating supply is, and what the total transactions in the network being done on a daily basis are. So you could see what is happening. So you would actually know how much transactions are circulating within the network, and you as a node can decide in your interface that you accept a lower fee. And well, if you do, you probably receive more transactions because people see that you offer a lower price than the other nodes. Having them putting that down as well. So basically, that makes it pretty transparent. So we got obviously a wallet showing that, and yeah, we use our algorithm is a little different than most of the other parties. Like you obviously at least proof of stake, but that calculates only the stake that you're holding. But we are looking more to the people. We want to reward the people. Right? That's what we said when we were designing this algorithm. We said, okay, I actually want to reward the people who are actually using the network. So the better you make an estimation about how much you use the network and the amount of tokens you own as a node, if you have a perfect match between those, let's say you're using 1% of the network and you own 1% of the network, you're like the perfect node. And if you're the perfect node, your chance of becoming the validator of the transactions to forge the block to receive the transaction fees being circulated around is 50% higher than somebody who's a passive staker who didn't match correctly. So let's say somebody who has a lot of doesn't really use it.
Very cool. So I think that definitely brings a lot of like good actors into the system. So, so just to make sure, it is not a proof of work coin or token. It is specifically proof of stake, correct?
Yeah, we call it proof of importance, but it's a variety of proof of stake.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure everyone had that understanding, because when we have like validation of transactions, a lot of people think about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a lot of these proof of work coins where you're actually mining and doing these different, completing these different algorithms to complete those transactions. So I just wanted to give the comparison. So you guys have actually brought out or created an interesting twist on ICOs. So you created what is called the bridge toll. I love the name. I think it's awesome. I'm personally It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan, so I don't know if you're a fan of that or not, but one of the episodes has to do with like the Toll Troll song. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So what is the bridge toll, and how is that benefiting, I guess, the people supporting this project?
Yeah, I think the bridge troll is the next level thing in ICOs, and the thing is, I asked my guys from BCG. I said, okay, guys, let's design a next level ICO economy, because the economy is the most important thing, because that is giving you the tools to keep your supporters happy. So let's design something which also relates to the real world, like where you have vesting schemes, and like what we're doing is not that new. We just used the old stuff which was already out there for a long time, like vesting and how you would give shares to other people. We're just putting that into our own system, and the bridge troll was actually like a vesting schema. So what we did is we said, okay, there are people who want to go in liquidity. They just want to go to the exchange and sell it. And then you have the people who are using the product. They're on mainnet and they need to stay there, because otherwise they cannot put transactions into those workflows. So we said, okay, let's set up a bridge. And let's put all the private investors who are normally dumping your token when they're unlocking, let's put them onto the mainnet. And let them pay a fee if they're walking over the bridge prematurely. Let's say, how much time do we need to show the world that we can gain enough traction that we are comfortable of unlocking everything? We said, okay, we can do that in 6 months. I said, okay, then we are starting with a 55% bridge troll fee from day one, gradually going down to 0 in 6 months. So let's say you bought a big portion of tokens with a reduction, because obviously that happens when you're selling to funds. But if they would want to go out in day one, the bridge troll would take 55% of the fees. So if you're selling 100 tokens, the bridge troll would take 55 and burn them. So leaving you with 45 in liquidity tokens. Because the 55% is burned, that benefits the people who are not scared of going out. So it would lower the circulating supply, being beneficial for the people who stay into mainnet, but also the people who are stay into liquidity, because they correspond equally. So burned there, also burned at the other side of the bridge. They correspond exactly. So there's no difference between those. So the circulating supplies between liquidity and mainnet is the same. So basically, every time a sale happens, a automated stabilization mechanism triggers, right? Because if you sell, the bridge troll burns, circulating supply goes down, stabilizing your price. So that happens every time. So you can create this infinity loop of stabilization mechanisms. And I cannot say too much about that, but having that in place, it could happen that you would just go up at least 6 months, because every time somebody dumps, fees get burned, it recoups the price, and probably being good for your ICO price.
Oh, definitely. I mean, for me personally, I've invested in a few ICOs. Unfortunately, it was I guess early on in 2018, and they all just got destroyed because every time everyone received their tokens, they hit an exchange. Everyone was just freaking out and was like, I need to get out. I need to get out. Like, I'm scared. And I think this actually brings a sense of trust within the project and what you guys are actually building. And it gives the community a sense of trust with each other.
Yeah.
Not just like sort of like a one-man game where it's like, all right, like, heck with you guys, like I'm just doing this for my own benefit. And so talking about like the ICO and all of that, you guys are obviously, you already finished up your private sales. Can you give us a little bit of background about how much you guys have raised to date? You already, by the way, hit your soft cap, so I'll give you a little golf clap for that.
Nice.
So when is the public sale? How much are you guys looking to raise? And I guess how much have you guys raised thus far?
So we had 5.2 is the total amount to be raised. We're doing 1.5 in the public sale, and the rest we did in a private and seed community. So back in 2018, I said to my other partners, let's not raise a insane amount of money like everybody does, but because I wanted to sell to America as well, I said, okay, let's do a small amount in Europe, and let's raise enough to release mainnet. Because if we release mainnet, we have a product, and then we can basically deliver to everybody, right? So that's what we did. We collected $1.4 million back in beginning of 2018, which was used to build mainnet. The rest, the 3.8, we that's 3.8, which was left is sold in private sales, and we're gonna have 1.5 million being done into the crowd sale in mid-January. And I think that's going well. Like it's such a small amount for ICO projects. Normally you hear about 40, 50, 60 million, but like having a company managed with, well, I have 30 people on my payroll. I wouldn't know how to spend 30, 40 million on having my organization grow. Without creating super much inefficiencies and throwing money at bullshit, right? Like it's pretty hard to spend if you don't make any money. It's pretty hard to spend more than 3-4 million on building your product in an efficient way, right? So you actually don't need that much more. And we do make money in selling our solution, which is also not happening quite a lot in blockchain projects. And so I build a cash flow model, and I actually don't need more than 5.2. So I'm not collecting more than 5.2.
That's awesome, and I have to say, like, I really respect you for that, because it probably wouldn't be that hard to raise more than 5-6 million, because when you think about it, with a lot of these projects, like you said, $40-50 million, like that's an insane amount. Like I couldn't even fathom that. Like we look back, Ethereum, I think it was in 2014. I think they only raised like $10 million.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just can't imagine what you would use all of that money for. It baffles me.
Yeah.
So kudos to you guys. I really respect that. And before we get before we finish up everything, is there anything that you would like to add, or anything that you would like to touch on that we haven't done already? We've talked about a lot of pretty exciting stuff that's going on in your neck of the woods. But is there anything that we missed?
Well, no, basically not. But I would say it would be cool to have people looking into to our solution. They can open up a wallet, set up a node. It's pretty simple. You have it running in about 30 minutes, and just to play around with it, right? If you just want to use it to anchor a document or an email to prove that you actually send it or actually hold that piece of data. Go and try to play with it, and if you're ready for the next level to run a decentralized workflow, go and play with that as well, right? So we are always looking for people who want to use and integrate our solution. You don't have to be a really big company doing that. You don't have to be Capgemini or Tata consultancy group to do that. Just come around, play with us, play with our solution, and we are really responsive in if people want to help us and help other corporations with using this product. And we are definitely supporting those as well. We're focusing on adoption instead of, putting the most effort into hyping the token, which is obviously important, but that will come gradually. If you get adoption, the rest will follow. And we've been on that line since 2018, and I think we will do that for the next 3-4 years as well. And people who are believing in us will get paid at the end of the ride.
Awesome. I love it. So if anybody has any questions or wants to follow what you guys are doing, are there any places that you guys have on social media that they can go and ask questions or see what's going on with the project?
Yeah, definitely. Just go to our website, LTO.network. We are where you can just follow our Twitter or where you can jump into our Telegram groups. We support multilingual channels, so it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Korean, Russian, or English native. It's all fine. You can jump into the Telegrams, and everybody's really supportive there. If you ask questions to me, I will probably answer it within 10 minutes.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, Rick, it's been an absolute pleasure. For those who've watched, I hope you learned something, and definitely go and check out LTO Network and what they're doing. It's really exciting stuff, guys. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.